Welcome to This Late Hour, a look at the world through the lens of Scripture. I'm your host, Kasey Knowlton. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today marks the third part of my discussion with returning guest Andrew Jones and the second part of my interview concerning the real Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia. If you haven't picked up the last interview or the last episode, I'd highly recommend going back and listening to that before moving on today. We're going to be moving right into discussion about the mountain and the kinds of rocks that are present on the top and all kinds of interesting features around the base of the mountain as well. So join me for my final discussion with Andrew Jones this season concerning the real Mount Sinai. I've always found striking is that this mountain is blackened on top. And as we read the Bible, of course, it talks about the Lord coming down in a cloud of fire. So what do we know about the discoloration on the peak of this mountain? And could we assume that perhaps this is a mark that was left by the Lord's presence?
Yeah, so the black top, that was first documented by the Caldwells. And so then Ron put that in his newsletter. And that, it's very impressive. You look around, you see this mountain, no clouds in the sky, and it has black rock on the top. In fact, the name itself and the name of the mountain next to it, the Arabic names for the modern mountain, or the modern name for the mountain, I should say, has this idea of burning or frying or burnt built into the Arabic meaning. So yeah, when you look at it exactly, it gives you an idea of what could possibly have happened there as a result of God's fire. Now, in regards to the type of rock that's up there, we know that this black rock is basalt. Again, we're back to basalt. That's a volcanic rock. And when you open it up, the rock, so the base of the mountain is this lighter granite, and the top is this blacker basalt. But you also find other types of rocks up there. You find marble, like these marble pillars you find at the base of Mount Sinai. They were mined. There's a quarry, an ancient quarry, up that valley where the stream bed is at, where the water would have come down. And at the top of that gorge is a vein of marble. You can see it in some of the photos people have posted online. And so you have marble up there, you have granite, and you have this black basalt rock. Now, some people say when you open it up that the outside is dark, but the inside is light. Sometimes that happens. I've been up there numerous times, actually, and I have a lot of different samples of rocks from up there, from the different peaks. And some of them, when you break it open, especially on a vein that's a crack that's already visible, so you can easily break it because the rock is pretty hard. But when you break it along that crack, the outside is the black, and then along that exposed section of rock you just took out, it goes to a lighter color, but it's still basalt. It's not like it's going from basalt to granite in the rock. So the question is this this basalt rock that obviously was already there? The fire god did not create basalt, but is this basalt rock unique compared to other basalt rock in the region around the world? Did God's presence create something that would have done something unique to the outside layer of this rock? Because normally, like, there is something called an effect out there called like desert varnish, oxidation. And if you look up that term with rocks on Google, you can find images of other rocks around the world where it's dark on the outside and goes lighter on the inside. So the question is not that that only happens here, because we know it doesn't, but can we prove that there was maybe a sped up process where the rocks really oxidized and changed color in God's presence more than it would naturally have done if it was just left out in the desert sun and eroded and oxidized in the elements. And so we don't know yet. In fact, we did get a sample of this rock out to Bar Ilan University, which has one of the top nanotechnology laboratories in Israel. And they are studying it right now as we speak, actually. We gave them the rock back in February of this year, and they are really interested in the site and actually doing the testing for us for free. So I don't have any results to announce on your podcast, but if we have something unique or interesting, or even if we don't, we'll let you know, and we can explain about it in a future possible interview, part 4. But anyways, so for now, I can't say much other than we know it's basalt, and we want to see if it's unique, though. What's going on with the outside layer, or if that's just natural. God's presence did show up also at the burning bush, and it did not consume the bush. So his presence did not physically change the bush, which was naturally grown there on Mount Sinai. So you do have the possibility that the same thing was happening on the top of the mountain. It does talk about fire and smoke. So the question is whether that was just the visual representation of God up there with him speaking out of the fire, or was he physically burning the rocks up there? And so we're hoping the laboratory could tell us something. So we'll see soon, I hope.
Well, I do know. I mean, as far as I understand, that the interesting thing is it's the only mountain that has a blackened top. Is that right?
No, yeah. So that's a misunderstanding, and I don't know who started that, but when you get there, you'll notice that. I mean, you can actually now see on Google satellite images that when you see the Makla, which is called Jebel Makla, that peak that has the cave of Elijah, and at the base is the altar of Moses and all that. But along that peak, you'll see the black rocks, and you'll see the color change. And it goes to further down the side of the mountain, it turns to granite. But that black rock continues on to the nearby mountain, which could possibly be part of the mountain of God. How big is God and how big was the fire on the mountain? But then it also goes west out down into the valley on the western side of Jebel Makla, which is the side that's towards the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba, and it continues on to those other mountains there. So this basalt layer, the basalt itself is not unique. It's covering a bunch of areas out there. The question I think is more interesting is whether the basalt on the top is unique compared to other basalt. But the black rock itself is not just on the very top of that one mountain.
So trying to get a visual image of this. So how many of the surrounding mountains is that blackened rock on then? Is it just it's like a certain amount of miles around that it covers, or is it going way out into other areas? Or
well, in the surrounding area, you do have a number of veins of basalt. You do have other mountains not connected to this mountain that are dark, and then those that are connected, you can say like the continuous black rock that continues from the peak. You have the mountain just to the south, and some people, I think they're right in saying that southern peak that's right beside this one could be included in the Mountain of Moses, name. But on top of that, though, as I mentioned, when you go to the west, this black continues. And I don't know the actual acreage or how many miles, but it does go down the sides of the back side, or you can call it the western side of this mountain range, down to the valley, which I've driven. That's a remote area back there on the west side, and then it goes up and covers the smaller hills and mountains on that western side. So again, I haven't measured the distance or how many acres, but it's not just on the top of this one mountain. That's 100% sure.
now you mentioned marble, like there was a marble vein that ancient mining had been taking place, and what we would assume Moses had made some of those altars, the pillars from. So is the marble only at sort of these vein areas, or is it also on the tops of the mountains, or is it just the basalt?
There is a marble vein near the very top of the mountain, and it continues down that gorge to right at the layer, the elevation where the black goes to granite rock, the rock type changes.
Mm-hmm.
That's where there's also a marble deposit, and that's where you find the quarry, which because you see the tool marks there, you actually see an unfinished pillar column, or one of those round cylinder
Mm-hmm.
pieces still there. And so that's up that gorge. That's you follow the gorge down, which is that stream bed. You end up at the altar Moses site, and where the rest of the marble's at down there. So yes, the marble itself does continue up even towards the very top of that, which is basically between the two peaks. But that ridge, basically between the two peaks, which is pretty high, it's near the top elevation for the mountain. There's marble there, so it's not just black. In fact, so besides that type of rock and the black rock, there is a flat area, and I was going to do a YouTube video about this. It's really interesting between, so on the southern ridge of this mountain, you find a number of small like humps or peaks kind of on the ridge. And
Mm-hmm.
between two of them, there's a flat area. It's just crazy because when you're walking along, you're trying to like rock scramble because there's no path, and you're just going over these boulders of basalt, and it's really difficult to walk. And then you come to this very it's like a rectangular flat area. And one of the rocks there, it's squarish, and from a distance, I was like, "Is that a man-made altar?" I mean, this looks so man-made. You get up to it, it looks more natural. But when I was walking around this flat area, you could land a helicopter there. But this flat area, it has granite rock. Like the rock in that area there is not basalt, and this is along the peak. This is along the ridge of those peaks. So this is at the top of the mountain. So you are finding more than just basalt up there. So yeah, again, yeah, I know that some people were really focused on the black being possible supernatural. I think it's going to be more focused on almost a molecular level. Can we determine if there's outside uniqueness to these black rock that's already there because it's natural basalt? Can we show that these are unique compared to other areas in the world or in the region of Northwest Arabia that has the same basalt rocks? And so that's what we're focused on right now. Like we got a sample of the very top. We gave it to the Israeli lab, and we also got a sample from another mountain that has basalt rock, black rock, nearby. But that was not connected to this one at all. It was actually across the plain. And we didn't tell the Israeli lab which was which. We said, hey, tell us what you can about these two rocks, anything. And so we just started that process. We gave them a sample in January, but they actually, because of their time frame, and they're doing this for free for us, so they had to fit us into their schedule. They just recently started the last couple of weeks. They're testing on everything. So,
Gotcha. Yeah, I've wondered, being near the top of the mountain, if maybe we could figure out.
Exactly. There's a mountain. I can even send you the link to it, and you'd think I'm in Saudi Arabia. And not a prank, but I went to this mountain in Southern California, and I took some pictures in front of it, and I posted on Facebook. And some friends were like, "Oh, you made it Mount Sinai," because this mountain, there's a geological term called it's escaping me, like top pendant or pendant top. So basically, the way like the layers are laid down, probably right after the floods. I'm a creationist, I believe. So I don't believe like the dates they give these things like millions of years. But so they have the basalt obviously came from an underwater eruption or just like when the water receded, they started erupting from a vent in the ground. And so this lava comes up and the basalt rock comes up from the deep. And then when that's laid down later on via plate tectonics or whatever's going on, these mountains are formed, and below it is granite, and that these mountains then push up. They're up, they rise up, and you have this now chain of mountains. And the very top of it was the basalt layer that was originally laid down, and below it you have the lighter whatever type of rock like granite. And there's a mountain in Southern California near Needles that's exactly like this. It has the dark top, very distinct line, and the bottom is a light colored. I don't know if it's granite or something, but the top is definitely basalt. And so you find, if you Google that geological term, you'll find examples of this phenomenon. So it definitely is a natural phenomenon. And so the question, though, is not, did God melt granite and make it basalt? Because it doesn't work that way. The geological process, when you melt granite, it doesn't turn to basalt. But the question is that basalt up there, which probably was already there when the Israelites came through, but is that basalt unique basalt? And is there something physically changed on the outside of it or anywhere in the rock that we can prove in a laboratory? And so we're taking our first steps at trying to answer that question.
So were the Ten Commandments made of granite, basalt, or marble?
So you think about it, the first set which God gave to Moses, and he broke. We don't know whether he just supernaturally created it out of nothing, or you look at basalt, it's ugly. It's not a nice looking rock. It's volcanic and porous, and it's just not nice looking. But marble is. People make statues out of it and such. Granite can be a nice looking. There's different like granite tops you put in your kitchen and all that. So there's different colors of granite. So the base of the granite is a tan, but speckled, different colors. The marble is obviously all white and nice looking. So when he broke that first set, we don't know exactly what it was. But what's interesting, when God told him to make the second set, it said he made it and brought it up. And so whatever stones he had at the base of the mountain available to Moses, that's what he used to make the second set. And so when God told him to make it like the first, did he mean like the size and shape only, or did he mean use the same type of rock? But at any rate, we know at the base of this mountain is marble sections that people have brought down, whether they did that or not at that time or later. But definitely there's granite everywhere. And so it's possible. I know some people say it's blue stone because they ate with God and they saw blue under his feet. But there's no blue stone there. We are finding some stones that has a blue hue or coloration. I can see some photos of that. Like there's a slight layer on the outside. And one of these stones I brought down from the summit, it has this like very thin layer of blue. I'm not a geologist, so I don't know what would you call it, but it sparkles and it's a blue tinge. It's not black, but it's on like the black stone, but it has blue on the outside. So I can send you a photo of that. And then one of our tourists, he's actually a CBN reporter who's on our last tour. Him and his wife found a section. They climbed up with us. They kind of went off on their own, and he came across this rock that has really beautiful patterns of blue in it. It almost look like fossils from the sea. But at any rate, they said it's really hard. You couldn't chip it either. But that was found on the side of the mountain too. So whether the Ten Commandments were blue, that's another story. But definitely, I believe it was a rock taken from that mountain range.
Of course. Now, I'm not familiar with this whole idea of the blue. It had to be blue. Where's this from?
Okay, so yeah, if you Google it, you see people discussing it. Well, it comes from the story where the 70 elders, they go to meet God. So they go up with Moses and Joshua, and said that they had the 70 elders of Israel along with he went up there, and Aaron. So it was quite a group. They went up there, and it says they ate with God. This is in Exodus chapter 24, and they ate with God, and he didn't kill them for seeing. I guess they saw his backside or part of him, but it says they ate with him, and under his feet was like a pavement of. The King James says sapphire or blue stone.
Mm-hmm.
I think they say it could be lapis lazuli, which is like a similar type to sapphire, but. Anyways, it's a bluish color stone, and that's what they said they saw under God's feet. People interpret that to mean, because later on it talks about like the stone Moses used to, that he was given, or I think at this point he had already the golden calf had not happened yet. So later on in that chapter, when God gives him the first set of the Ten Commandments, people try to connect the verses together by saying, look, it talks about the stone, and the only unique stone in that chapter is this blue stone. And so they try to connect the two and say, well, this might be what God first gave Moses was, Ten Commandments written on blue stone.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Anyways, that's kind of that theory, But anyways, there's not like sapphire up there or lapis lazuli stone, but there's definitely this black rock at the top, and some of it has, again, a bluish outside layer. But again, I don't know if that was what the Ten Commandments was written on, or the nice white marble, or the tan granite. at the base.
Well, let's move back down the mountain. I want to talk a little bit about these petroglyphs because you have these cow petroglyphs, kind of all over that what we would assume is the golden calf altar. Now, I don't know if these been compared to the Egyptian style, because I know the Egyptians had a god like a cow, didn't they?
Yeah, they had two.
Yeah.
They had a male god called Apis. He was a bull, and then they had the female goddess Hathor. And both you can see elements of being possibly used during this incident. It used the plural in Exodus where it says, I think Aaron says this, these are your gods that took you out of Egypt, So they, the Israelites, having lived in Egypt that long, would have obviously known the pagan religion of the Egyptians, and both were famous deities in the Egyptian pagan religion. Now, Hathor, which is the female goddess, female cow, she's, I believe, I remember correctly, she's like the patron for artists. Think of somebody who's making a golden calf, but also for musicians, and I think partying and sensuality. So you do have all these elements that would just fit with them throwing a big rave or a party at the base of Mount Sinai, and dancing around this god or a bunch of gods, like the Apis bull and a cow goddess. Now, are these petroglyphs carved in the style of this? Now, what's really interesting, when Ron went there in 1985, the David Fasold, they were placed under house arrest by the Saudis. Poor Ron, he goes back legally and he still gets in trouble. Anyway, so they're in the Saudi citizen who had invited them into the country with a legal visa. They were just, they weren't put in prison, but the Saudis told them, you need to stay at this guy's house. And so they were there, and they waited for a Saudi archaeologist from Riyadh University. Riyadh is the capital of Saudi Arabia, and he flew into Tabuk. It's like a 2-hour flight or a 1.5-hour flight. So he gets there, and David Fasold had videoed like all their activities at the mountain, and they show this guy on video like what they had found. And he sees the petroglyphs, and Fasold backs up what Ron said, and that the Saudi says to Ron that these are Egyptian style cows, and he congratulates Ron. And Fasold backs that up too. He says the Saudi congratulated Ron for his discovery, just based on looking at Fasold's video. And then that's when he offered Ron to stay and help them excavate, and Ron declined. But today, if you were to ask the Saudis, though, in fact, they put a book out back in 2000, I want to say, called Al Bid. In this book, they actually mentioned Ron Wyatt and Larry Williams and Bob Cranuk, and they claim in there that these cows are not unique and that they're just found all over the place. Now, you do find cow petroglyphs. I've seen others like far from the mountain and other sites around Arabia. Arabia is full of rock art. There's a lot of rock art. So who made what? It's really difficult to date cow petroglyphs, But what's interesting, you have this whole pile of boulders, and the original archaeologists who saw it said these are Egyptian style ones, and it's at the mountain that the other locals said, here's the mountain of Moses, Hina Jebel Musa. So you have all these pieces fitting together that this could be unique. But then they left it alone. They didn't really study out anything further about the site. They fenced it off, the Saudis did, but they haven't done much after that. So I think there's further work that can be done there. But again, based on the original statement that they said that these were Egyptian style cows. And so I don't think there's a problem to quote them on that.
Well, and if we go a little further away from the mountain, we come to the split rock. Now, this is quite extraordinary thing to see on video. Obviously, we can't see it on this podcast, but I will link it in the show notes. But some of the drone footage of that is incredible. So what can you tell us about the giant split rock, what we would call the Rock of Horeb?
That's one of the most amazing sites. So on my first trip there in 2016, I was able to thankfully climb Mount Sinai. But what it was stood out the most of everything on that trip, and we saw everything that was mentioned in Ron and the Caldwell's material, was the split rock. That was the thing that stood out the most to me. see, it's huge. Like in the video, it's kind of hard. Maybe now with drone video, you can understand how big it is. But when you're there, you see this huge split rock standing on its own on top of a hill that's not that small itself. So it's pretty high up. The whole thing, the rock plus the hill, and then you, especially that one angle where you see through the split. It's just amazing to realize what God did there. But this site is on the western side of the mountain range. And according to the biblical account in Exodus 17 and 18, this was called Rephidim. So this is where there was no water, which even today there's no oasis right there. So you can see why they were complaining about the water. This is where the Amalekites end up attacking them. So you do have large plains and valleys all around the split rock where the Israelites could encamp, plus go outside of the encampment and fight the Amalekites. So there's plenty of space for both of those. And then you also have evidence of water erosion or wind erosion around the rocks there. But it's really interesting at the base of the split rock, where the split is, you really see this erosion in effect. And so, some people have said, well, that's just natural because you have other rocks that are smooth around the area. But what's interesting is, it doesn't discount what happened here. According to the Bible, in Psalms, I believe 105, it says it was rivers of water. You think of the 1 to 2 million people, plus their flocks and herds that needed water. It wasn't just a trickle. People weren't walking by. I saw this a painting done in the Renaissance, and like everyone had a cup. They're like walking up to a little, like in a line, and they're getting like a little
drinking
sip
fountain
of water. Yeah, exactly. And you think how long that would take, and then you have the animals waiting in turn. So definitely, what this says in Psalms makes total sense that there's rivers of water coming out. So I can see if that's true, which I believe it is, then that would eroded quickly the rocks. And so, yes, you would have natural erosion around the area, but what happened there and what formed that erosion at the split rock could have happened within a matter of hours or days as the water is rushing through. We don't know, how many days they encamped at Rephidim before they went on to Mount Sinai. So that, again, this area fits perfectly. Now, there's something just really interesting about this site. You talk to locals. We had a friend of ours, or acquaintance, I should say, tell us this story. He said they ran into one of the locals who happened to actually be born at the base of the split rock. His mother gave birth to him at the base. Now,
Wow.
and just like you have like in modern times, you have someone with the same name, or like you want to say like this person, like understand who they are. You say like, oh, that's Andrew of Sacramento, like where I'm from. Like there's a bunch of Andrews or whatever. And over there, like they do the same thing, where it's like they have, let's say the guy, I don't know what his name was, but let's just say it was Muhammad. So let's just say if he's known as Muhammad, like there's a number of towns in the area, he could be like Muhammad of Cairo or Muhammad of Riyadh. Well, his name was Muhammad of the Rock, because everyone in the area knew what they meant when you say the Rock. It was the special, unique looking rock that's standing up there at the base of Jebel Allah's. And so when God tells Moses in Exodus, stand by the rock, he talks about the water coming from the rock. Well, out there's rocks everywhere. I mean, there's no trees hardly, and it's just barren mountainside of solid rock. And so, like, which rock is he talking about? Well, it's interesting today when someone says, I'm Muhammad of the Rock, you're in that area, you know that he was the guy who was, born at the base of the split rock. And so it's interesting because, it fits the biblical account of when God says something very similar to Moses and says, stand by the rock. It had to been a special rock that they would understand.
Is it our understanding that Moses would have been on the top of this rock when he struck it, or just on the side, or how do we suspect that would have happened based on the biblical account?
Well, so there's a number of hills beside it, like connecting to where this rock is standing on top. So it's possible he was either standing on a hill right beside it, or he could have stood at the base of this rock, and the water, because it's split in half, so the water would have shot out from the sides. So he could have been on a side that did not have the water shooting out. So there's different ways you could visualize it, but definitely there's space for him to stand and not get washed away by the water.
And there is a way to get to the top of it, isn't there?
Well, to the base of, yeah, you can walk up the hill. There's definitely a way to walk up the hill to the base of the split rock, but you cannot I suppose if you're a mountain climber with gear, you can scale the actual rock and get to the very top of it. But yes, you can get to the top of the hill that has the split rock on it.
Gotcha.
We do that on our tours. Yeah, we take people up there and they can explore. They can go through the split. Look at. I mean, it's really interesting because you find this smooth indentions like holes. And so some people pointed out that, well, maybe this is where the actual water like miraculously came out of the rock inside there. Speculation, but yeah, still very interesting to consider that.
So around the split rock, isn't there also evidence of like sandal prints on the rocks, or like some kind of, because there was a battle there you mentioned, isn't there evidence of that, and even an ancient graveyard nearby? Am I right on this?
Okay, so some of that's right. There is on the backside of this rock. I say the backside because everyone takes the photo of one side of it, which is the west side. So on the east side, near there, there's a whole area of black rock, and you do see petroglyphs carved on there, like hunting scenes, and interesting enough, these sandal like footprint type petroglyphs. And so some have connected that to the Israelites. Obviously you're speculating because it doesn't say anywhere that they had the carved their footprints on the rocks. Though there's a verse in Deuteronomy talking about where God says that wherever they walk will be their territory. Though he does clarify, where that is, and he talks about the promised land. So I do know some people try to extend that down to Saudi Arabia, but personally, I don't think that's the case. So when you look at the other side of the mountain, on the east side where the Israelites encamped, you also find this footprint petroglyphs, and in other parts of the Middle East. In fact, there are different scholarly papers printed about the footprints, and so they're found in other parts of the region, not just at the Split Rock.
So
In regards to your other question about the graveyard, yeah, so that's the part where so the graveyard is actually on the eastern side of the mountain range, very near the encampment. I think it's a couple miles away from the Golden Calf altar, but it's on the base of the other side of the mountain. So that makes sense, though, with the biblical account of when they killed the 3,000 as an example from worshiping the Golden Calf. So the Levites went and killed 3,000, and this huge graveyard that's an archaeological site and fenced off and has standing stones in it. That's right near, where the Golden Calf incident happened, but outside of the encampment. So they didn't bury their dead, for cleanliness issues and laws of purity. Obviously, the dead were not buried in the camp. So yeah, this was just outside the encampment at the base of the mountain. And another key piece of evidence, I'm glad you brought it up, but yes, there is a graveyard there.
And I know at one point there was a menorah that was carved into a rock that unfortunately someone defaced. But
yeah, Dr. Kim found that I think 2005 or six. But that's about 95 miles south of here. So it might have been part of the wanderings. After they left Mount Sinai and they got denied entry in the Promised Land, they wandered for another 38 years. And the Caldwells and even Ron Wyatt believed that wandering was not in a little area in the southern Negev or the Sinai Peninsula, as the traditional maps show you in the back of your Bible, but that the wanderings were actually throughout the Arabian Peninsula for 38 years. So they possibly carved that during that time. It's definitely not at the base of Mount Sinai. Dr. Kim never got a GPS location for it, but he gave us the general area. And then based on his photographs, I had a tour group in January of 2020. We went back there using his photos. We were able to rediscover the rock that has an inscription on it. And sadly, it is destroyed now. Only that one, you can still see the menorah shape, but they chiseled out the menorah and left everything else. There's other ancient writings on it and characters on that big boulder, but obviously the publicity about it didn't sit well with some of the locals or somebody, and they sadly chiseled it out.
So when you kind of see the full, amount of evidence and start putting it together, it seems, very likely that this is the correct location. And it's not just one thing, it's dozens of things. As you see the pillars, you see the troughs, or the place where they would have done sacrifices, and the potential golden calf altar, and then you have the cave and the graveyard, the split rock, and it goes on and on. So given just the propensity of the evidence, why do you think, kind of similar to our conversation about the Drupner site, why do you think there are still some who kind of reject the idea of its authenticity.
Well, maybe it's too good to be true. It's like, wow, if you have everything that matches in the Bible, I don't know. It's hard. Again, it's hard to know everyone's reason as to why they hold a certain theory or idea and are unwilling to change their mind. I think if you're honest and willing to seek truth, this makes sense. If you're going to hold on to something, maybe it's because that's what their PhD was based on, or whatever their pastor taught them this, or because they have their own theory of where Mount Sinai is, that are unwilling to look at another site with the evidence. Again, I don't know one other site that has everything matching than this site here in Northwest Saudi Arabia. Other sites, you run into one or two issues or three issues, or there's a whole bunch of issues that they have to get around, or they have to change the biblical account to make it fit their Mount Sinai. So I believe this site is a perfect fit. And you have not just the geography of the area and this possible archaeology around it, but you have the local tradition of the Israelites and Moses being in that area, even though there's a traditional site just right across the Gulf. There was this local tradition that was kept alive in Northwest Saudi Arabia.
So given the fact it used to be, well, it still has some fencing, but now that it's opened up to the public and to tourists, and it's not under, machine gun. There's not guys walking around with guns anymore, protecting this place. We're pretty fortunate to be able to get in there and just, have tours and go and see these sites. Why do you think God has allowed this to be opened up now in this time and, on the earth?
Well, I believe, like many others do believe, that we are living in end times and that God does not want anyone to perish. So he wants everyone who is honest and searching for truth to have all the evidence they need that he is God. Now, some people need more physical evidence than others, like doubting Thomas. They need to see proof that these biblical stories occurred and that the Bible is true. And God, again, is willing to give that proof to those who are honestly looking for him, searching for him. And so that's why I believe that during this time in history that you have these pieces of evidence coming out for these key biblical events. If we knew about Mount Sinai 200, 300, 400 years ago, there'd be nothing left today. And we have a lot of doubters today with atheism and evolution being taught, that you need this type of evidence for those who are honestly searching. And so that's why I think God has preserved these sites until now.
So where can people find more out about the real Mount Sinai? Where should they go if they want to find out more about your work and more about the mountain?
Well, there's a number of sites. Now, if they want to come on a tour, we have a 5-day tour we do out there. It starts on a Monday, so they need to fly in on a Sunday, and it goes from Monday to Friday, and then they fly out Friday night. And they get to see all these sites in person. And if they're physically able to, they can even climb to the top of Mount Sinai into the cave of Elijah. They can go do that via our website. It's discoveredsinai.com. That's past tense, discoveredsinai.com. And there's the tours are listed there. Now, they just want to watch videos if they can't come. That's fine. We have a lot of videos online, as do others. But you can look us up under Discovered Media on our YouTube and other social media platforms.
We'll make sure to link all that stuff in the show notes. There's so much more I want to talk about. It's such a fun topic, and seeing all these treasures that God has been revealing, but we are running out of time. But Andrew, so thankful you've come back on the show today. Thanks for giving up your valuable time.
Thank you for having me. I'll be happy to do this again.
All right. Well, God bless you.
God bless.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with our returning guest, Andrew Jones, concerning the real Mount Sinai. Friends, there's so much more that could have been said. I was actually having trouble with the way I was recording the interview and keeping him on. And he actually was communicating to me from Turkey, so it was really late his time, and I had to let him go. But I would have loved to have talked for another hour with him. There's literally so much that can be talked about. So many just gems that can be found there in the desert in Midian and Saudi Arabia area. In fact, one of the things I saw recently is, because, in the Exodus account, it talks about the manna from heaven. that God provided this supernatural sustenance, this sort of flaky, breadish type material that would, be found on the ground in the morning that they would collect, and they would grind it up. And one of the areas there down, I don't know if it's by the split rock or by the base of the mountain, but you can find these old mortars, like a mortar and pestle where you would grind up spices. There are these rocks that are smoothed out with a rounded inside, as a mortar, where you can see where they would have been grinding up the manna. I mean, it's just every time you look, there's another thing that confirms or lines up with the biblical narrative of the Exodus account. Quite frankly, I think there's almost no question this is really Mount Sinai. I mean, it's like 99.9%. I only leave the 0.1 percentage there because there's not a flashing sign that says Moses was here. I mean, it is truly, you couldn't ask for a more perfect location as far as the alignment to Scripture. Everything is there. The oasis they travel to, the Red Sea crossing, and the room for the 1 to 2 million people. There's been, apparently, the chariot wheels found on the ocean floor that have been encrusted with coral. Now, this may be a coincidence, but there are some very stunning shapes that look like Roman chariot wheels. In fact, one of the interesting things about the Nuweiba beach where they, assume that the Israelites would have crossed is that there's drop-offs under the water. There's sort of a land bridge, a natural land bridge that would have been at the perfect place for them to cross when the Red Sea parted. But if you go too far over on the other side, there's a giant drop-off that goes down, 8,000, 10,000 feet, something like that. And what I've always wondered is if we had a submersible, what we would find if we took it down there. Because if you get that to that depth, coral will not grow there. So anything that has fallen off the side will likely be preserved. Wouldn't that just be stunning to go down and see some things that may have been washed over the side of that land bridge? And then just coming up to the mountain again, you have the giant split rock, and you have, the petroglyphs and Proto-Hebrew language that's been found on the rocks, the sandal petroglyphs. You have the golden calf altar, the cave of Elijah, the blackened top, which may or may not be something to do with the Lord's presence. You have the pillars of Moses, the altars, the animal troughs, or the animal fencing where they would have kept the animals for sacrifice. It's all there. You see the place where the water would have been to come down and quench the thirst of the travelers with the dried up stream beds and wells. Truly, it's amazing. And again, I ask, why now? Why has God allowed this to be found, in the last 30 or so years? And now you can take a tour there. I mean, this place used to be under guard with, by guys with machine guns. We are very privileged and blessed to be able to just go to the mountain and see it. I don't think God has brought it into our knowledge, has brought it into our attention for the point of us just being able to go and take a tour there. Which, hey, if you have the funds and can do it, I would love to do that. I mean, that would be a huge blessing to be in that place because it makes the biblical stories real. I think it's very easy for us to think of our Bible stories as just, even though we believe them to be true, they become a story and just a piece of our theology rather than a very tangible historical event. And this is one of the joys of being able to go to these places, to physically touch the places that these biblical saints, are heroes of the faith, if you will, have been and walked, and these stories that we've read all our lives. But I don't think it's just for that purpose. I think it's God has been bringing these things up because of the days we're in, as an attempt to get people's attention because the end is drawing close. In fact, it's interesting when we think about like three of the major, what I call discoveries, or the things that have been brought to the attention of the world or the church, is that you have Noah's Ark, what we assume is Noah's Ark at the Jerupaner site, and I'd say the evidence strongly supports that, and I'm interested to see what the results of these tests were from these Turkish officials. But that, represents the covenant It's a mark and a remembrance of the covenant that God made with Noah. Then you have Mount Sinai, where the covenant of the law was brought, and then you have the Shroud of Turin, which is a stark and beautiful and remarkable reminder of the new covenant. And so I find it interesting that, many of the things that are being rediscovered, found again, brought to the attention of the church in these days, are things that point to God's promises, that we can trust his word, we can trust him to be faithful and to fulfill that which he has promised us to do. And we also know he has promised to return, and that he said that the gospel of the kingdom shall go to all the nations, and then the end shall come. Do we believe him? Because if we do, that means we are close friends, and that we can trust his promises to be true. Are you prepared? Are you ready? Dear friends, be ready. The time is getting close, and we are called as believers to be awake and to not be asleep. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I'm going to link his website below in the show notes. Wherever you're listening to your podcast, you should be able to find that. And I'm also going to link to some of the videos, because really, it's hard to fully grasp just how breathtaking and amazing this site and the surrounding sites around the mountain are without having seen them. I mean, the Rock of Horeb is beautiful, and being able to capture it with drone is really a remarkable thing. So I would highly recommend go and watch them. It should really be an encouragement to your faith, and just to see the places where history was being made, and that we can be reminded that God fulfills and keeps his word. If you're enjoying these podcasts, I would ask that you please give the show a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. As far as supporting the show, now I've talked about this $5 a month to get, this monthly long-form bonus episode content. I just want to make a quick disclaimer on that. Friends, there is an attempt to silence and squash out voices in the Christian community, voices that are trying to proclaim truth right now. I have had the hardest time trying to get bonus content set up in order to put out there, in order to, I wanted to give something, an incentive to try and help, keep the lights on here. We pay for distribution fees and, licensing fees for a lot of the music, and I'm wanting to be, wanting to present to you something that is well put together and pleasant to the ear. It does require some funds. And so I wanted to put together these bonus episodes and just have, long form discussions about all the many different things that are going on in the world. And just getting it set up has been so difficult. I had a Patreon. I retired that in order to go through my distributor. My distributor, I'm trying to do this all through my distributor for bonus episodes, and it's just not working. There's apparently all these quote unquote errors. So I'm going to probably go back to Patreon and start trying to release there again. And depending on how much time I have, I may even do more than just monthly content. Just because frankly, it's getting late, guys, in the hour. And I'm exhausted, as I'm sure many of you are. But it's my hope that come the fall, I'll be doing weekly episodes again. I mean, I could pull out, a news article every week and talk about the significance of it, in the days we find ourselves in. I don't want you to go and be saturated in bad news. Remember to keep your eyes on the good news of Jesus. He is coming. So let's keep our eyes on that. But just know I'm trying to get bonus content to you, and just be, keep your eyes open for that. If you don't see any links for it, don't worry. I'm trying to get that taken care of. I, appreciate all your prayers in getting that resolved. If you have questions or comments, please send me an email here at thislatehourpodcast@gmail.com, or visit our Twitter at Kasey Knowlton, or the Facebook page, This Late Hour. And a quick comment on the Facebook page, I don't do much there. Most of these places are just places where the episodes will land, because, again, social media is also a place where if you say much of anything that's true, you're likely to get a mark or get banned. In fact, if you remember from season 1, I had a long discussion with my friend David about the vaccines. Just a very, laid-back conversation, about why he decided to get vaccinated, why I didn't, that was banned off YouTube. I mean, I provided links to articles. I don't know that we said anything that was untrue, and yet still it was, labeled misinformation. So this is the day and age we live in, folks. So thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Season 2 of This Late Hour, and please tune in next time where I'm going to hopefully be breaking down, yes, I'm going there, Revelation 6 with the horsemen of the apocalypse and the 7 seals of Revelation. Stay on the alert, dear Christian. Until next time, God bless.
You have been listening to This Late Hour. Your contribution helps pay our fees, improve our equipment, and build better content. It is my hope that your continued support of our show may bring future interviews and exclusives. Our goal is to always be improving our show so that the church may be strengthened in our mission to bring salt and light to this present darkness. May God richly bless you.